The night I discovered the truth, I sat in my car outside our home for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Inside, my wife of 20 years, the woman I had built a life with, the mother of my children, was waiting for me, completely unaware that the foundation of our marriage had been shattered by a single revelation. It all started with an old friend's drunken confession at a college reunion. A man I hadn't spoken to in years, a man who had no reason to lie, leaned in close over his scotch and muttered, "You know, back in the day, she wasn't exactly faithful, right?" I laughed it off at first. It had to be nonsense. College days were messy, memories unreliable. But the way he avoided my eyes, the way he immediately tried to backpedal, it unsettled me. That night I started digging. Old messages, photos, receipts. I even reached out to a few mutual friends from those days, casual inquiries at first. The picture that formed was one I had never imagined. While we were dating, while I had been head over heels in love with her, planning our future together, she had been seeing someone else. Not a one-time mistake, not a lapse in judgment, but a full-fledged affair. A secret life I had never known existed. And now, 2 decades later, here I was, staring at our house, the home we had built together, wondering if everything I thought I knew was a lie. I walked inside, my heart pounding. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, looking up with that familiar, warm smile. "Hey, you're home late. Everything okay?" I sat down across from her, pulling out my phone, the screenshots, the proof. I know. Her smile faded. "No, what?" she asked, too quickly. "That you cheated on me when we were dating. That you kept it from me for 20 years. Silence. A beat. Then she exhaled sharply, setting her phone down. That was a long time ago. And yet, it still happened. She straightened up, her expression shifting. Defensive, calculating. "So what? We were young. I chose you, didn't I? I married you. I built a life with you. Does that mean nothing?" "It means everything," I said, my voice steady. "And that's the problem?" She scoffed, shaking her head. "You're really going to throw everything away over something that happened before we even said, 'I do'?" That was the moment I realized it. It wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the lack of remorse. The way she dismissed it, like it was nothing, like my trust had never mattered. I stood up. "I wish you had told me," I said. "I wish I had known. The truth before I spent 20 years believing a lie." She called my name as I walked away, her voice desperate now. But it was too late. The past had caught up with the present, and the weight of it was too much to bear. Some betrayals are immediate wounds. Others are slow-acting poisons, hidden beneath the surface, eroding trust one invisible crack at a time. This one had taken 20 years to destroy me. But it had, and I wasn't staying to see how much more of me it could consume. Would you like to explore the wife's perspective? Or perhaps a shocking twist where things aren't as they seem? As I stepped out of the house, the cold night air hit me like a slap, but it didn't clear my head. My heart was still racing, my thoughts tangled in a storm of betrayal and regret. Behind me, the front door remained open. I could hear my ex-wife, calling after me, her voice trembling between anger and desperation. "Wait, just please, let's talk about this." Talk? Now she wanted to talk? After 20 years of silence, I kept walking, down the driveway, to my car. But my hands were shaking so badly that when I reached for the door handle, I missed it. I gritted my teeth. Damn it. I wasn't supposed to be this affected. I had told myself I was ready to leave, that the moment I confronted her, I would be free. But instead, I felt like I was sinking into something deep and suffocating. Then my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You finally know." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I turned back toward the house where my wife was, standing in the doorway, watching me with wide eyes, arms wrapped around herself. She looked afraid. Another buzz. She never told you the whole truth, and she never will. My pulse pounded. I glanced around, suddenly feeling watched, my stomach twisted. Who the hell was this? Slowly, I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared, flickering in and out. My heart hammered as I waited. Then the reply, "Meet me at the Hollow. Midnight. Alone." The Hollow. An old, abandoned park on the outskirts of town. A place we used to go back in college. A place where secrets were whispered in the dark. I looked back at my wife. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her body rigid, as if she could feel the shift in the air. I turned back to my phone. I should have ignored the message. I should have walked away. Instead, I slid into my car and drove. Midnight at the Hollow. The park was exactly as I remembered it. Silent, eerie, wrapped in shadows. The trees swayed in the wind, whispering secrets of their own. I parked and stepped out, heart thudding. A single street lamp flickered near the entrance. No one was there. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. A man, tall, wearing a hooded jacket, his face obscured. "You came," he said. His voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Who are you?" I demanded. The man exhaled, then slowly pulled back his hood. My blood ran cold. It was Daniel, an old friend. My best man at our wedding. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "You should have left it alone," he said quietly. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. "Why are you texting me about my wife?" Daniel hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket, a folded-up photograph. He handed it to me. I didn't want to take it. I didn't want to know. But my fingers closed around it anyway. I unfolded it, and the moment my eyes landed on the image, the world tilted beneath my feet. A photo of my wife and Daniel together. Laughing, kissing. The date in the corner? A year after we were married. I staggered back. "No." "She lied to you about the past," Daniel said, his voice hollow. "But the real secret? She's been lying to you about the present." The weight of it crashed over me. This wasn't just about 20 years ago. It was about now. I had walked away from my marriage thinking I had uncovered the betrayal, but I had only just begun to unearth the truth. And it was so much worse than I ever imagined. Do you want to push forward into a confrontation? Or twist this further, perhaps your wife knew Daniel was the one pulling the strings all along. I stood frozen, the photo trembling in my hands. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. The past was one thing. I could have buried it, convinced myself it didn't matter. But the present, the ongoing betrayal? I turned my eyes to Daniel, my so-called friend. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw everything. "How long?" I growled. He sighed, stuffing his hands into his jacket pockets. "On and off. For years." My stomach twisted. My hands clenched into fists. Years? Years? While I had been coming home, kissing my wife goodnight, believing in the life we built together, she had been with him? I lunged. My fist connected with his jaw, a sickening crack echoing through the empty park. Daniel staggered back, clutching, his face blood seeping between his fingers. "I deserved that," he muttered. "You deserve a hell of a lot more." My chest heaved, rage curling around my ribs like a vice. "Why the hell are you telling me this now?" Daniel wiped his mouth, his expression dark. "Because I'm done being her secret, and because you deserve to know." I wanted to hit him again. I wanted to break every bone in his face. But more than anything, I wanted to understand. "Was it always you?" I asked. "Even back in college?" His eyes flickered. And that's when I saw it, the hesitation, The lie. It wasn't just you, was it? My voice dropped, my blood turning ice cold. Daniel didn't answer. How many? I pressed, stepping closer. How many others? His silence told me everything. I thought I had uncovered the betrayal. But my wife, she was never faithful. Not then. Not now. My whole marriage, my whole life with her. It had been built on nothing. I staggered back, my head spinning. I needed to leave. I needed out. But as I turned toward my car, my phone buzzed again. A new message from my wife. We need to talk. Now. I looked back at Daniel. Did you tell her we were meeting? He shook his head, which meant she already knew, and that terrified me more than anything. The wife's secret. When I got home, she was waiting. She sat at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in front of her, her expression unreadable. So, she said, swirling her glass. You finally talked to Daniel. I said nothing, just stared at her, waiting. She sighed, shaking her head. You were never supposed to find out. Find out what? I asked, voice cold. That you've been screwing my best friend behind my back? That you've been lying to me since the day we met? She chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. Oh, darling, Daniel is the least of your concerns. My blood turned to ice. What the hell does that mean? She took a sip of wine, then met my eyes with something dangerous lurking beneath her gaze. It means, she said, that this marriage was never about love. Not for me. And now that you know, well, and that's a problem. The room suddenly felt too small. My mind reeled. Daniel had been a distraction, a pawn. My wife, she had been playing a game this whole time, and now I was about to find out what happened to men who stopped playing. Want to go deeper? Maybe a hidden motive or a dangerous twist. The wife's. I felt the weight of her words settle over me like a suffocating fog. This marriage was never about love. The betrayal was bad enough. But this? What the hell does that mean? I asked again, slower this time. She smirked and leaned, back in her chair, tapping a manicured nail against the stem of her wine glass. It means, darling, she said, that I've spent 20 years making sure I always stayed ahead of you. And you? You've spent 20 years blissfully unaware. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just infidelity. This was something else. You're lying, I muttered, shaking my head. She let out a small, amused chuckle. Am I? I gritted my teeth. I needed answers. Then tell me, I said, voice steady. Tell me what I was never supposed to find out. She exhaled, as if weighing her options. Then she gestured toward the chair across from her. Sit. I didn't move. Her eyes darkened. Sit, or you won't get another chance to hear the truth. Reluctantly, I sat. She swirled her wine, watching me closely. Let me ask you something, she said. Did you ever stop to wonder why I married you? I blinked. Because we loved each other, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, they felt hollow. Her smirk deepened. No, sweetheart. You loved me. My throat tightened. What are you saying? She set the wine glass down carefully, then leaned forward. I needed something from you, she said. And now that you know too much, I need something else. A chill crept down my spine. What did you need from me? She tilted her head. Oh, come on. Think, darling. You were always so eager to please, so devoted, so willing to sign anything I put in front of you. My mind raced. Sign, and then like a punch to the gut, it hit me. The house, the investments, the joint businesses. Everything was in both of our names, but over the years I had trusted her with the details, the paperwork, the contracts. Oh, God, I whispered. She smiled. There it is. I shot to my feet, the chair scraping against the floor. You set me up. She didn't even blink. Of course I did. Rage surged through me. The affairs were one thing, but she had been planning this for years. You're a monster, I spat. She sighed, standing up slowly. No, darling. I'm just smarter than you. I clenched my fists, every instinct screaming at me to walk away. But something still didn't add up. Then why not divorce me? Take everything and leave? She chuckled, a dark, soulless sound. Because that would be too simple. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. And besides, she murmured, a grieving widow gets so much more sympathy than an ex-wife. My blood went cold. I took a step back. She just smiled. Good night, darling, she said sweetly, turning away. Sleep well. The escape. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, every muscle in my body on high alert. I knew what she meant. She wanted me dead, and I had no doubt she had already planned how to do it. She was calculating, patient. She wouldn't rush. She'd wait until the moment was right. I had to act first. At dawn, while she was still asleep, I grabbed only what I needed: my wallet, my keys, the files from my office, evidence. Then I walked out the door. I wasn't coming back. But I wasn't running either. No, this wasn't over. I was going to take her down before she could take me out. Do you want a revenge arc? A legal thriller? Or something even darker? I drove with white-knuckled focus, the early morning roads nearly empty. The city felt different, colder, sharper, like it had conspired with her all these years. I pulled into the parking lot of a dingy motel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was safe. For now, I sat on the edge of the bed, spreading out the files I had taken: bank statements, property deeds, business agreements, and one thing that made my stomach drop: a life insurance policy, $2 million, payable upon my death. My name. Her as the sole beneficiary. My head spun. She had been planning this for years. The affairs were just distractions. The real betrayal was financial, calculated, methodical. And if Daniel hadn't sent that message, I might have ended up exactly where she wanted me, dead. A knock at the door snapped me back. I grabbed the motel lamp, gripping it like a weapon. If it was her, I wouldn't go down easy. I peeked through the peephole. Daniel. I opened the door just enough to glare at him. You've got 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't break your face, he sighed. Because I can help you destroy her. I hesitated, then let him in. He dropped a folder on the bed. You think she only played you? He asked. I frowned. What are you talking about? He opened the folder. Inside were photos, documents, more names, not just me. 3 other men, each one with the same life insurance policy, each one financially ruined before they mysteriously died. My stomach twisted. She's done this before, Daniel murmured. You're just the next one in line. I gripped the edge of the bed, nausea rising. Why the hell are you telling me this? I asked. You were sleeping with her. Daniel exhaled. I thought I was special. Thought she'd leave you for me. Then I found out about the others. And guess what? He looked up, jaw tight. One of them was my brother. Silence crashed over the room. I stared at him. His brother. I had been ready to kill Daniel. But now we had a common enemy. And we were about to take her down. Setting the trap, we needed a plan. Going to the police wasn't enough. She was careful, always making sure nothing could be tied back to her, but everyone had a weakness. And hers? She thought she was untouchable. She needs to think she's won, I said. Daniel nodded. And then? I clenched my jaw. Then we bury her. The final move, I went home that night, acted normal, pretended like I hadn't discovered the truth. She smiled when she saw me. The predator, thinking its prey had returned? I was worried about you, she said sweetly. I just needed time to think, I replied. Her eyes flickered with satisfaction. Good. let her believe she had me wrapped around her finger. The next day, I called my lawyer, quietly moved my money, changed my insurance policy, rewrote my will. And then I left a trail, one she would find, one that would make her desperate, and when she finally made her move, when she tried to take me out for good, the police would be waiting. The fall of a queen, it happened on a Sunday evening. I came home late. She had poured me a drink, her usual routine when she wanted me calm. But this time, I switched our glasses. She didn't notice. She sat across from me, watching as I took a sip. "You know," she murmured, "we should take a trip. Somewhere private." I smirked. "That sounds nice." She smiled. Then she picked up her drink, and in less than a minute her face twisted in horror, her fingers clutched at her throat. The same poison she had planned for me now raced through her own veins. I leaned in, voice low. "Did you really think you were the only one who could play this game?" She collapsed to the floor, gasping. And then, the sirens. The door burst open. Officers swarmed in. She was still alive, barely. But the evidence? Overwhelming. Daniel and I had made sure of it. As they cuffed her, she looked up at me, betrayal flickering across her face. "You set me up," she croaked. I smiled. Of course I did. The aftermath. The trial was swift. She had covered her tracks well, but not well enough. Once the police started digging, the bodies started showing up. The insurance. Fraud. The false alibis. She was done. Daniel and I walked out of that courthouse free men. He lost his brother. I lost 20 years of my life. But at least now, we weren't the fools left in the wreckage. She was, locked away, forgotten, exactly where she belonged. Final words. Some betrayals break you. Others make you dangerous. She should have chosen her prey more carefully. Want a twist where she escapes? Or do we leave her rotting in a cell? It should have been over. The trial had been swift. The evidence damning. But a woman like her didn't just disappear. 2 years after her sentencing, I got a call in the middle of the night. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something in my gut told me to pick up. "Hello?" A pause. Then, a voice that turned my blood to ice. "Miss me, darling?" I nearly dropped the phone. "No, it wasn't possible. She was in prison." "You sound surprised," she purred. "I told you, sweetheart. I'm always one step ahead." My hands clenched around the phone. "What the hell do you want?" She chuckled softly, like this was all a game. And to her, it was. "Let's just say, I have some unfinished business." The line went dead. A chill crawled down my spine. I checked. The caller ID. Traced the number. It was coming from inside the prison. I should have felt relief. She was still locked up. But if she could reach me from inside, then she still had power, and she wasn't done with me yet. The hunt begins by morning. I was at Daniel's door. He took one look at my face and knew. "It's her, isn't it?" he said. I nodded. "She called me last night." He swore under his breath. "That's impossible. She's in maximum security." I shook my head. "Not impossible." Not for her. We both knew the truth. She had connections. We thought we had beaten her. But she had only been waiting, watching, planning, and now she was making her move. A woman with nothing to lose. 2 days later, Daniel's apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen. No forced entry. Just one thing left behind. A single glass of red wine. Her signature. I found Daniel pacing, his face pale. "She's out," he said. "She has to be." "No," I muttered. "Not yet. But she's sending a message. She wanted us to know we had won the battle. But the war was still hers to finish." The prison break, he spent weeks looking over my shoulder, checking every locked door, sleeping with a gun under my pillow. Then, one morning, I turned on the news. And there it was. Breaking news. Convicted Black Widow Evelyn Carter has escaped from Fairview Correctional Facility. Officials report an elaborate scheme involving bribed guards and a staged medical emergency. The fugitive is considered extremely dangerous. My vision blurred. My hands clenched. She was out. Daniel's phone rang. I didn't have to guess who it was. He answered, putting her on speaker. "Hello, boys," she said, voice smooth as silk. "Did you really think you could get rid of me so easily?" I took a breath. "Where are you?" I demanded. She laughed. Now, darling? That would ruin the fun," Daniel cut in. "If you come after us—" "Come after you?" she interrupted, amused. "Oh no, sweetheart, I'm not going to come after you." A pause. "I'm going to make you come after me." And just like that, the line went dead. I met Daniel's gaze. I knew what she meant. She wouldn't just kill us. She was going to play with us first, and we had no choice but to play along. The final game. It started small. A letter in my mailbox with no return address. Inside, a single photo, me, taken the night before. Then, Daniel's car brakes mysteriously failed. He barely made it out alive. Every move we made, she was watching, always one step ahead. She wanted us desperate, paranoid, weak. But she made one mistake. She thought we were still the same men she had fooled before. She didn't realize we had changed. And this time, we weren't playing to survive, we were playing to end her. For good. End game. Approaches, Daniel and I weren't running anymore. We were hunting. She wanted a game. She was about to lose. Because now we knew the truth. She wasn't unstoppable. She wasn't invincible. She was just a woman. And even queens can be taken off the board. Want to see the final showdown? Or do we let her disappear into the shadows, waiting to strike again? We spent weeks hunting her, but she was always a shadow ahead. Then, out of nowhere, she moved. A package arrived at my motel. No return address. Inside was a single playing card, the Queen of Spades, and written on the back, "One last dance, darling. Meet me where it all began." I felt the blood drain from my face. She was calling me back to our old house, the place where we built our life together, the place where she had planned to kill me. Daniel tensed when I showed him. "It's a trap," he said. "Of course it is," I muttered. "So what's the play?" I exhaled. "We don't run. We finish this. The House of Lies. The night was thick with silence when we pulled up to the house. The windows were dark. The place looked abandoned, but we knew better. Daniel and I moved in carefully, weapons drawn. Then, as if she had been expecting us, the eye. Lights flicked on, and there she was, sitting at the old dining table, a bottle of wine and 3 glasses waiting. "Took you long enough," she said, swirling her drink. She looked the same. Perfect. Untouched by the years, the betrayal, the prison walls. I clenched my jaw. Not this time. "It's over, Evelyn," I said. She laughed. "Oh, darling, you still don't understand, do you?" She gestured to the seats. "Sit." Daniel took a step forward. "We're not playing your games." Her smile deepened. "But you already are." Then I saw it. A small device on the table. A blinking red light. Daniel noticed it too. "Shit," he muttered. She sighed. "You boys never check for wires, do you?" My stomach sank. She was recording. I glanced at the wine bottle. At the second blinking red light beneath it. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a setup. "What did you do?" I demanded. She smirked. "The real question is, what did you do, darling?" Then my phone buzzed. A notification. I pulled it out and felt my pulse skyrocket. It was an email from my own account, a confession, detailing how I had plotted to kill my wife, how I had manipulated evidence to frame her, how Daniel was my accomplice. And it had already been sent to the police. I looked up at her in horror. She grinned. Checkmate. The Queen's Gambit. We didn't have time to think. Daniel lunged for the recorder, but boom! An explosion tore through the house. I was thrown backward, slamming into the wall as heat and smoke filled the air. My ears rang, my vision blurred. Daniel coughed, struggling to his feet. She rigged it! Of course she had! I pushed up, my limbs screaming in pain. We had to get out, but she was gone. No trace, no body, just a burning house and a frame job so perfect we were already dead men. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance. Daniel and I locked eyes. We had two choices: run, disappear, and spend our lives as fugitives. Find her first and end this. We both knew the answer. We weren't running. She wanted a war. She just got one, the final hunt. The next morning, our faces were everywhere. Murder suspects on the run. Husband who framed wife, now wanted for arson and attempted murder. The police were looking for us. But we weren't the real criminals. Evelyn had vanished, but not for long, because there was one thing she didn't count on. She taught me too well. And now, I was coming for her. No more games, no more tricks. The queen thought she had won, but she forgot one thing about chess. Even the best players eventually lose, and I was about to end her reign for good. To be concluded, do you want a high-stakes international chase, a psychological showdown, or the darkest ending yet? We disappeared. Not because we wanted to, because we had to. Evelyn had turned us into ghosts overnight. Every bank account frozen, every connection burned, every camera in the city feeding our faces to the authorities. For weeks, Daniel and I lived in shadows, using burner phones and stolen identities. But while we were hiding, we weren't idle. We were hunting, because she had made one mistake. She thought we'd stay on the run. She thought we'd be too desperate to think. But Evelyn had spent years controlling the board. Now we were flipping the table, and she never saw it coming. A ghost leaves tracks. Evelyn was careful, but no one disappears without a trace. We tracked down an old contact, one of the guards she had bribed to escape. He was holed up in a motel outside Chicago, thinking he was safe. He wasn't. Daniel and I cornered him in his room, pressed against the wall, eyes wide with terror. "I don't know where she is," he pleaded. "Then you're useless," Daniel growled, pressing a knife to his throat. The guy swallowed hard. Then he cracked. "She's in London," he spat. "She's setting up something big, something about a new identity, new money. She's rebuilding." London, of course. Evelyn wasn't just running, she was starting over. I stepped back, letting the guard breathe. "One last thing," I said. "Who's funding her?" The man hesitated, then his lips curled into a smirk. "You don't get it, do you?" "You're already too late." "I didn't ask twice." Daniel slammed him against the wall. The guy gasped, panicked now. "A man named Lancaster," he choked out. "Some billionaire with a thing for dangerous women. He's helping her disappear." That was all we needed. Daniel let him drop. "If you're lying, we'll find you again." The man didn't answer. We didn't wait for him to. We were on the next flight to London. The final city, London, was a different battlefield. Bigger, wilder, and crawling with people who would sell you out for the right price. We kept low, watched, waited, and then we found her. Evelyn was staying at the Lancaster estate, a sprawling mansion outside the city. High walls, private security, money dripping from every surface. She thought she was untouchable. She wasn't. The reckoning. The night was cold when we made our move. We slipped through the gates, avoiding the cameras, disabling the alarms. Inside, the mansion was quiet. Too quiet. We moved carefully, guns drawn. Then, a slow clap. I turned, and there she was, sitting by the grand fireplace, swirling a glass of wine. "You finally made it," she purred. Daniel raised his gun. "Game's over," she smiled. "Oh, sweetheart, The game never ends. Then, the lights cut out. Gunfire. Daniel and I dove for cover as bullets tore through the room. We had walked into a trap. Evelyn never played fair. The last move. I was done playing defense. Through the chaos, I spotted her slipping out a side door. She was running. I took off after her, heart pounding, through the halls, up the grand staircase, onto the rooftop. The wind howled as she turned to face me, the city stretching below us. "You never learn, do you?" she said, breathing hard. I raised my gun. "Neither do you." For the first time, I saw something in her eyes. Something, real fear. She laughed softly. "You won't do it." I stepped forward. "Watch me." She smirked, then moved fast, too fast. I fired. She lunged, and suddenly we were both at the edge, fighting, clawing, the city spinning below. Then, her fingers slipped. For the first time in her life, she lost control. I saw it in her eyes, and then she fell. A silent scream. A blur of black, and then nothing. I stood there, breathless, staring down at the darkness below. The Queen was finally off the board. Game over. Aftermath. We left London before the police could ask questions. There was nothing left for us there. Nothing. Left of her, but even now, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, swearing I hear her voice, swearing I see her shadow, and I wonder, did she really fall? Or was this just another move in her game? Because women like Evelyn Carter, they don't die, they just wait, and one day I know she'll be back. The end. Or is it? Do you want a definitive ending, or do we leave the door open for one last trick? London was behind us. Daniel and I went our separate ways. He left for the mountains of Argentina, swearing he was done with the game. I tried to disappear too, but some ghosts never rest. And Evelyn Carter was one of them. The letter it arrived on. A rainy morning 3 months later, no return address, no fingerprints, just an envelope slipped under my motel door. Inside, a single playing card, the Queen of Spades, again, but this time, there were no words on the back, just a smudged red fingerprint, a woman's fingerprint. I felt my stomach twist. Daniel was halfway across the world. No one else knew about that card. No one but her. I stared at it, pulse pounding. If this was a joke, it wasn't funny. If it was a message, it meant she was still alive. A name from the dead, I made a call. One of my last contacts in London. Someone deep enough in the system to know what the police didn't. Tell me everything you know about Evelyn Carter's body. A pause. Then a sigh. That's the thing, mate. There was no body. I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. What? She fell, yeah. But by the time the police got there, nothing. No corpse. Just broken glass and blood on the pavement. Blood, but not a body. I gripped the phone tighter. How much blood? Another pause. Too long. Not enough to say she's dead. Silence stretched between us. Then he whispered something that made my blood turn to ice. Rumor is, someone picked her up before the cops arrived. Who? I demanded. He exhaled. Some rich bastard. Same guy funding her before. Lancaster. No, I had watched her fall. I had seen the fear in her eyes. But Evelyn Carter had spent her entire life cheating death. And now, she had done it again. The hunter becomes the hunted. I packed my bags, burned the motel room. It didn't matter where I went. She would find me first. I stepped into the street, rain slicking my jacket, and then I saw it. A black car parked across the road, tinted windows. Engine idling, waiting. For me. I exhaled slowly. Then I smiled. So the game wasn't over after all. I took one last look at the city around me. Then I stepped toward the car, straight into the jaws of the Queen. To be continued. Do you want one final, brutal confrontation? Or a darker twist? Where maybe, just maybe, I'm the one who's been played all along. The black car door clicked open. I hesitated. A trap? A message? A bullet waiting in the dark? Only one way to find out. I slid inside. The door shut. The city disappeared behind tinted glass. And then, a voice, smooth, familiar, amused. Hello, darling. My breath hitched. She was alive, and she was right beside me. Evelyn Carter, smiling, perfect, wearing a black dress that dripped elegance and danger in equal measure, like she had never died, like she had never lost, like she had never fallen. I swallowed. I watched you go over that rooftop. She tilted her head. You did. And now you're sitting here. Her red lips curled. I am. She leaned in slightly, perfume laced with old memories and sharper regrets. Do you really want to know how I survived? Or would you rather wonder? My fingers itched toward my gun. She saw it. She laughed. Soft. Dangerous. Please, darling. She reached forward, adjusting my tie like we were still married. If you were going to kill me, you'd have done it on that rooftop. I let her finish fixing my tie. Then I grabbed her wrist. Why am I here, Evelyn? She sighed, dramatic as ever. Because I let you live, and now I need you to return the favor. I blinked. Excuse me? She settled back into the leather seat. You want revenge. I want something bigger. Which is? She exhaled. Lancaster betrayed me. I frowned. He saved you. Her eyes flickered. Something sharp and unreadable. And then he locked me away. That threw me, Evelyn. The Evelyn Carter had been captured, controlled, used. She saw my confusion and smirked. Men like him always want to own women like me, until they realize we can't be owned. I stayed quiet. I knew that tone. She wasn't playing. She was plotting. I got out, she continued. But now I need him gone, and I need you to help me do it. I shook my head. So now we're what? Partners? Her eyes glowed. Oh no, darling. She leaned in, breath hot against my ear. We're lovers again, just like old times. My pulse spiked. Every instinct screamed, run. But a darker voice, one I hated, one she had crafted in me, wanted to stay, wanted to play, wanted to burn the whole damn world with her. I exhaled. You're insane, she grinned. And you love it. I should have pulled the trigger, but instead, I kissed her. And just like that, the game began again. To be concluded, do you want this to end in fire and betrayal, or one final twist that neither of us see coming? Evelyn's kiss tasted like smoke and chaos, a reminder of everything we once were and everything we had become. It was a dangerous thing, pulling me back into her orbit, and I knew it. But the truth was, I didn't care. Not then. Not when she was standing right in front of me, still that unpredictable force I couldn't shake. We pulled apart. Her smile was dangerous, the same smile that had always sent chills down my spine. You're going to help me, whether you want to or not, she said, her voice low. Lancaster made his move, now it's ours. I gritted my teeth. I don't care about Lancaster. She raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in her gaze. Of course you do. I turned away, eyes burning with the weight of it all. What's your plan, Evelyn? She shrugged as if the weight of her next words were nothing to her. Simple. We destroy Lancaster. We take everything from him. His money, his power, his empire. And in the process, we make him regret ever thinking he could control me. I stayed silent. The plan was messy, reckless. And yet, the part of me that had once been drawn to her chaotic brilliance stirred. And what do you get out of it? I asked, the question more for myself than for her. Her lips curled. Oh, darling, what do I ever get out of anything? Control, power, revenge, and you. One last time. I had to fight the urge to ask what she meant by one last time. The way she said it sounded final, permanent. But I didn't have the luxury of asking. We were already moving. The setup Lancaster had underestimated her. Like all men who thought they could control Evelyn Carter, he believed he could use her and toss her aside once she had outlived her usefulness. But Evelyn had other plans, and she was using me as the perfect pawn in her game. We spent the next few weeks carefully orchestrating our move. Evelyn's network was vast. She'd spent years building it in the shadows, pulling strings from behind the scenes. Every ally, every contact, every piece of leverage was already in place. Lancaster's empire was more fragile than anyone had realized. His obsession with wealth and power had blinded him to the simple fact that he wasn't untouchable. And Evelyn? She was a masterpiece of manipulation. She played every angle, every moment like a chessboard. And me? I was the knight she moved when she needed to. The break in it was supposed to be simple: infiltrate Lancaster's mansion, steal the incriminating files he kept hidden deep in his vault, and leak them to the press, expose him for everything he was, destroy him without firing a shot. But nothing was simple with Evelyn. We made our way through the mansion's security, slipping past cameras and guards with surgical precision. Her plan was flawless until it wasn't. As we neared the vault, alarms blared. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. "What the hell?" I muttered. Evelyn cursed, her face a mask of fury and concentration. "He knew we'd come. We're walking into his trap." I looked at her, disbelief flashing through me. "You said this would be easy." She grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a hidden passage. "I said it would be worth it. Now follow me." We ducked through the narrow corridor, the sounds of guards growing louder. She led me deeper into the belly of the mansion, where the walls seemed to pulse with history and wealth. Finally, we reached a small, dimly lit room. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. She gestured to the massive safe in the corner, the one Lancaster had put all his secrets behind. "One last step. Once we open it, there's no going back." I turned the combination dial, feeling the weight of everything we had done, the lies, the games, the betrayals, and then the vault door creaked open. Inside, a collection of files, documents, and an envelope, all of it damning. I picked up the envelope. The name on it burned into my mind: Lancaster's Fall. But before I could react, a shadow moved across the doorway, and there he was, Lancaster, standing tall, smug, with that same calculating smile on his face. "You really thought you could take me down?" he said. "Evelyn, I thought I taught you better." I reached for my gun, but Evelyn stopped me with a look. Her expression was unreadable. "You were never meant to beat me, darling," she said softly. Lancaster laughed, his voice echoing in the cold room. "You're right. She never did." The final betrayal, and then the twist. Lancaster stepped forward, the smug grin still on his face, but his eyes locked on me. "You should have known," he said. "I always knew you would come for me. But what I didn't expect was your loyalty to Evelyn." I froze. Evelyn didn't react. She was watching me, her expression unreadable. "She played you, didn't she?" Lancaster continued, his voice turning cold. "You thought you were part of the game, but you were nothing but another pawn, a way to get to me." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You lied to me?" I whispered, looking at Evelyn. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something there. Regret. The world shifted under my feet. Evelyn's words stung more than the cold metal of Lancaster's smile. I stared at her, my heart pounding in disbelief, the pieces falling into place. Everything had been a lie. She had used me, all along, for Lancaster. I couldn't breathe. The air around me thickened with the weight of it all. For 20 years, I had believed I was her partner. We had shared everything, the highs, the lows, the joy, and the betrayal. But this moment, felt like the final cruel cut. Lancaster's laugh echoed off the walls. "You're nothing more than a shadow of a man, playing in her game. Did you really think she would ever care about you?" My fist clenched, the rage bubbling inside of me, threatening to explode. I looked at Evelyn, but she wasn't even sorry. She was calm. "You're a fool if you think this is a personal betrayal," she said softly, her voice almost gentle now. "This is business, and I'm always good at business." I lunged at her, but Lancaster's voice stopped me. "Don't be an idiot." He took a step forward, eyes gleaming. "You still think there's a choice here? You're already dead." I stopped. His words struck like ice. Dead? My gun was in my hand before I even realized it. But before I could raise it, Evelyn stepped forward, her eyes locking with mine. She raised her hand, palm outward. "Don't!" Her voice was quiet, almost too quiet. "You've played your part. We're done. Done. Done!" The word rattled through my brain as if something had just shattered deep inside of me. What had I become? "I can't let you win," I said, voice hoarse. Evelyn tilted her head. "You don't get it, do you? The game's over. Lancaster wins. I win." She smiled, that signature wicked smile. "And you? You're nothing but a casualty of the war." I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the weight of the truth settling into my bones. Evelyn didn't care about me. She cared about herself. Always had. Always would. I was the last piece she needed to complete her plan. And now that she had what she wanted, I was expendable. I dropped the gun. It clattered to the ground, but my anger didn't dissipate. The rage, the grief, it churned inside of me like a storm. And then I did something I never expected. I smiled. The final move, Lancaster's face flickered with confusion. He'd expected me to crumble, to collapse under the weight of betrayal. But I wasn't going to be the one who ended up broken. Not this time. "You really think you've won?" I said, my voice steady. "You think you can control everything?" I turned my back on them, my hand sliding into my jacket pocket. Lancaster's eyes narrowed. "What? Are you—" Before he could finish, I pulled out the envelope from earlier, the one with his name on it. "You're wrong," I said, flipping it open. Everything was in that envelope. Not just the files on Lancaster's dirty dealings, but the things he didn't expect. The incriminating evidence that would send him crashing down. There were bank accounts, secret meetings, political connections, all the things that would ensure his fall from grace. I placed it on the table, and it sat there like a ticking bomb. Lancaster's face paled. "What the hell is this?" Evelyn's calm demeanor slipped for just a second. She took a step forward, eyes flickering to the envelope. No, that can't be." "It is." I reached into my other pocket, pulling out a flash drive. I slid it into the laptop on the desk. The files appeared, each one linked to Lancaster's empire of lies. He made a move to stop me, but Evelyn's hand shot out. "Don't." Her voice was quieter now, colder. I didn't care. "You didn't think I would let you walk away scot-free, did you?" Lancaster turned to her, his voice tight with panic. "You said you would take care of this. You said—" Evelyn's eyes hardened. "I did. You just didn't realize that I had no intention of saving you. This was always a setup. You were always a means to an end." A look of realization passed over Lancaster's face. He turned toward me, eyes wild. You've been planning this all along. You used me, just like you used her." Evelyn's smile was as cold as death. "Exactly. The end game, A's." The files began to upload, and the truth began to leak out. Everything started to crumble. The mansion's windows filled with flashing lights. The sound of sirens approached in the distance. Lancaster's empire was done. The documents were already online, being sent to every major news outlet, every law enforcement agency. The destruction of his wealth and power began in real time. I watched him unravel, his face twisting with rage, disbelief, and fear. His empire, his world, the very foundation he had built crumbled beneath him in an instant. But Evelyn, she didn't flinch. She didn't react. She was the one who had orchestrated it all. She had played us both. She had won. The final twist as Lancaster was led away in cuffs. I turned toward Evelyn. Her eyes met mine. No more pretense, no more games. She was done with me. Her voice was low, but it was the final cut. I thought I was done. I thought the game had ended. I thought I could walk away from it all, the lies, the manipulation, the chaos. I had seen how Evelyn played the world like a puppet show, pulling strings, twisting fates. But I never imagined that the final act would be my own. But I was wrong. It never ends. Not for someone like Evelyn Carter. And now I was tangled up in the very web I thought I'd escaped. The Callet was weeks before I saw her again, but I never stopped thinking about her. How could I? I was waiting for a plane at a small airport on the edge of town, trying to outrun my past when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of her voice. Over the phone. You thought you could escape. Her words came through like a soft, venomous whisper. I clenched my fist, staring at the phone. I'm done, Evelyn. I'm walking away. You won. Her laugh echoed in my ear, cold and familiar. You think I let you go? I didn't respond, but I knew. She hadn't. It's not over, darling, she said, a dangerous calm in her voice. You think Lancaster was the end of this? Think again. I swallowed. What do you want? She paused, the silence stretching for a moment too long. Then she said it, her words dripping with something I couldn't quite place. I want you to finish what we started. My stomach tightened. I'm not doing this again. You don't have a choice. She hung up. The Job, I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to breathe. She made sure of that. I found a package waiting for me that same night. Inside was a flash drive. Nothing else. I plugged it into my laptop, praying for a reprieve, but there was none. The contents were more than just files. They were instructions. Get me what's in the vault. No questions asked. It was a familiar request. The kind of mission I had lived for once, before it all went south. I knew the vault. Lancaster's secret vault. A place where the things he feared were kept. His real secrets. The ones that could destroy more than just his empire. But this was different. I had already seen the destruction those secrets could bring. This time, there was something worse. Something far more dangerous. And Evelyn knew it. The vault. I couldn't ignore the pull. I couldn't stop myself from falling back into her game. The vault was where it all began. Lancaster's fall was supposed to be the end of it. But now it seemed like a dark shadow creeping up behind me, ready to swallow me whole. I made my way through the familiar streets to the familiar mansion, the one where everything had gone wrong. It was eerily quiet when I arrived. No guards, no cameras. The lights flickered through the windows, casting strange shadows on the walls. I had been here before. I had stood at the edge of this precipice and thought I was done. But I knew better now. The game was never over. The vault doors opened with ease, the combination dial spinning under my fingers like a twisted ritual. My heart hammered in my chest as I stepped inside. And there it was, the file, the one that would change everything. I reached for it, my hand trembling. But as I lifted the folder, a sound echoed behind me. You're late. I froze. It was her voice. Evelyn. The final confrontation. I turned around and there she was, standing in the shadows, her eyes gleaming with something darker than I had ever seen before. "You weren't supposed to take this, you know." Her smile was dangerous. "You were supposed to bring it to me." I held the file tightly, not knowing if I should run or confront her. "I've given you everything, Evelyn. What more do you want?" Her smile faded, replaced by something much colder. "I told you before. This isn't over." She took a step forward. "You thought you were done, but the truth is, you're still useful to me." My hand tightened around the file, but my pulse was racing. "I'm not your pawn anymore." Evelyn's eyes glinted with amusement. "Oh, darling, you never were." She took a slow, deliberate step closer. "I knew you'd come back. I knew you'd never walk away." I looked at her, the anger rising within me, but there was something else there too. Regret. And that was my mistake. The final betrayal. Before I could react, Evelyn's hand shot out, and in that instant, she had me cornered. "You think you can control me, control this?" she whispered, voice soft but filled with malice. And just like that, everything I thought I knew was wrong. She was never going to let me walk away. I had been the game all along. I had played into her hands. Again. And when the vault doors slammed shut behind me, I realized she had already won. The vault door closed with an eerie thud, and I found myself trapped in the place I once thought I had escaped, a place that had no beginning and no end. Just as Evelyn had said, I hadn't walked away. I was never meant to. The air in the vault was thick with secrets, too many to count. The very walls seemed to pulse with the weight of power, manipulation, and lies. I was in a room full of stories that could ruin more than just Lancaster. They could unravel everything Evelyn had worked so hard to build. But there was no time to dwell. Evelyn was standing before me, her posture relaxed, almost casual, as if everything had gone exactly as she had planned. The fire in her eyes was still there, but there was something else too. Something darker. "You didn't think I would just let you walk away, did you?" she asked, her voice sweet but with an edge that sliced through the silence. I stood, the file still clutched in my hand. The weight of it felt like 1,000 pounds. My fingers twitched with the urge to throw it at her, to stop this madness, once and for all. But I knew better than to make a move. She had the game under control. "Why? Why all of this?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the tension. "You could have left me alone. We could have both walked away." She tilted her head, looking at me as though I were a puzzle she had already solved. "Do you really think it's that simple? We both know it isn't." There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Regret? It was fleeting, like a shadow, but I saw it. She had never cared about anyone but herself, but there was something about me, something she couldn't fully discard. "This isn't about me anymore, Evelyn," I said, more to myself than to her. "You've already won. Lancaster is finished. What more do you want?" She took a slow step forward, and in the dim light, she looked like a queen surveying her kingdom, all-powerful and untouchable. "I want you to understand something," she said, her voice colder now. "Everything I've done, every move I've made, it was all for this moment." The finality in her words was chilling. She had orchestrated everything from the very beginning. The moment we met, the way she wove her web around me, it was all part of the plan. But what was the plan? To break me? To make me a pawn in her game of power? I stepped back, my mind racing. "So what now?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small black box, the kind that looked innocent enough but could hold anything from a key to a weapon. "Now you're going to do exactly as I say." My heart skipped a beat, a command, and I had no choice but to obey. I eyed the box warily, trying to read her expression, but she was a master of hiding her intentions. There was something about the way she held the box, like it contained a piece of her final move. "What's in the box?" I asked. already knowing she wouldn't tell me. Her lips curled into a smile. Your freedom, if you're willing to make a choice. The choice Evelyn opened the box slowly, revealing a sleek, polished black key. It looked almost too perfect, like something out of a dream or a nightmare. You've spent your life being manipulated, haven't you? She said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. You think you can escape me, but you can't. You were always meant to play your part. I swallowed hard. What is this key for? She placed it in my palm, her fingers brushing mine for the briefest of moments. Cold. Empty. The key is to your future, she said. It opens the door to everything you've ever wanted, or everything you've ever feared. I stared at the key, trying to make sense of it. But there was no sense to be made. This wasn't just about Lancaster's fall anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was something else, something far more dangerous. Evelyn was giving me a choice, but it wasn't really a choice at all. You have two options, she said, her voice calm but carrying a quiet danger. You can take that key, open the door, and walk away from all of this. You can live the life you want, the life you've always dreamed of. I frowned. And the other option? Her eyes gleamed, the dark glint of a predator cornering its prey. Or you can turn that key against me. You can expose everything I've built and ruin me. I froze. Expose her? Destroy everything she had worked for? I wasn't sure I could do that. Not to her. Not to her. What happens if I don't make a decision? I asked, my voice shaky with uncertainty. Her smile faded, replaced by something harder. Then the game will end for both of us. You'll never escape, and I'll make sure of it. The ultimate betrayal. I stood there, key in hand, feeling the weight of it settle deep in my chest. This was it. The final moment of the game. Evelyn had played me for so long, and now the tables were turned. I had the power to destroy her, or to walk away. The choice was mine, but I couldn't escape the feeling that this was never my choice to begin with.